player will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. We had Summer Resnick, the new limited unit, added to Global this week. So today's character review, all the normal topics that we cover from the character overview, some of the stats, the report card, some general thoughts. I'll go through the kit, we'll look at a sample build, and a whole bunch more. But kicking things off, brand new Fire unit added to the game here with the unique main job of Summer Maiden with Sword Sorcerer and Cleric as the subjobs. She does equip books as her weapon of choice, and equips cloths, hats, and accessories as the others with a move of 3, jump of 1 as a 100 cost unit, and yes, absolutely a 97 faith unit. She is a support, and so her heals are directly tied to whatever your faith stat is. Now, her max range, and she only has one ability, is 5 squares away, and it is a small cross-shaped AoE. No single target abilities throughout the main kit there. Resistance-wise, her status elements are 50% resistant to poison, to stun, and then 10% to curse, which is very, very valuable here. The negative 10% to strike is really the big negative weakness that sticks out, but her mastery ability, they gave her some cast time reduction here. It's the only place innately that she has it, but there is a passive you can equip to further reduce her cast time. We will talk about that on a later slide. She's got 10 AoE resistance here, minus 3 hate, which is always very noteworthy because the negative hate can often skew the buff order where teammates prefer to buff units that have the highest hate next to them. She does have a permanent 10% magic reduction taken as well, and 10% ice resistance too, which is scattered throughout her kit as well. Now, from a base stat perspective, pretty average, quite frankly, in many of these stats, but as a support unit that is within what we'd expect, her HP is relatively in line with most units in the game, even pre-4th anniversary units, and her magic stat is right on the borderline here. 425 is basically my edge of divisions here, which is good still, but we've certainly seen higher magic stats as of late. The dexterity stat is right in line with all the other units, which makes sense. She's not a high crit rate unit. And the luck is also not bad, but just on that border again of that 180. It's still a very healthy luck stat, but it's not as high as some of the other units that we've seen recently. And the total stats, when you add in the board, the mastery ability, things of that nature, I really wouldn't say there's any weaknesses here personally, particularly as a support unit where the only stat that really matters is maybe the agility, just to make sure that they can maintain turn order with the top end fastest DPS in the game. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with where the total stats ended up. And when we look at the agility on that topic, she is relatively fast. There is an agility passive, which you probably will have on most of the time, but not all the time. And if you do, she does get up into that 88 agility range, which is near where the top of the competitive ceiling is at the moment. But even without that, she's still in a serviceable agility spot overall. When we look at the rest of the stats here, again, crit hit rate, definitely below average, not something to expect. She does have a decent amount of crit evasion, though, where in her board nodes that you'll unlock, she does have some critical evade percentage points there that does put her well above where most of the curve ends up falling innately. From an accuracy perspective, very inaccurate, and although she's technically average accuracy, just from the number perspective, we are in the state of the game where if you're average accuracy, it might as well be bad. You really need to have far above average accuracy to make sure that you don't need to rely on any kind of guaranteed hits in your kit. And then when we look at the evasion perspective, her luck is just a smidge lower than some of these 4th anniversary units, so she's not nearly as high on the gradient of pseudo evade as most other units are. Is it possible with the Sorrow Fire Vision card? Sure, maybe, but probably not to the level that you're used to seeing with some of these 4th anniversary units. When we get to the total report card now, a couple things to point out. Her effective HP is actually a step behind where Lucille and White Mage Fina are as of late. She's a little bit squishy, but her survivability is absolutely an A+, so much so that I really don't think the effective HP is something that's worrisome to me. Her damage is absolutely an F. There's no imperils, no penetrations, no resistance downs, no barrier breaks, so I would never expect her to do any kind of significant amount of damage. The agility is pretty decent. The accuracy is also very bad, all things considered. The evasion is kind of there, not really. The movement, there's really no other way to add any move or jump to her, so she's basically stuck in her move 3, jump 1 base, which is fine, but for supports, that's pretty normal. The auto ease of use, I'm actually going with a C- here, and this is why I took a couple days to release this. Her support AI and buffs don't make for good innate movement. She does kind of become a statue after a couple turns with their healer AI, where that means that when she uses uses a self-buff, she will opt not to move forward ever. Only if she opts to do nothing with her turn will she move forward, which for some supports that's really good, but she is an aura-based unit. She's got a bigger aura than average, which we'll talk about later, but I've had some difficulties making her move and keep near her teammates in such a way that she's actually able to function optimally. And honestly, the TMR buffs that are secondary options have very conflicting priority with her second buff, which is the aura, which is exceptionally important to always get off. And so I think people are going to struggle with just like the opening buff rotation compared to how easy units like Lucille and Shals and Fina are. I think she's just slightly more difficult. Not to mention that as a book unit, she can be more difficult to fit into a team compared to some of those others. Now, the game disruption, that being said, is an A-. She will be better when Shreka comes out because she is meant to help against that meta as well. But right now, she is a huge Sephiroth disruptor and Gilgamesh disruptor with the right conditions. And passive abilities, I'm very happy with. Counter abilities are okay. It's topical to what we're seeing. The overall jobbing kit is an A-. She's a great anti-curse and anti-frostbite aura with great buffs and enormously important on-hit effects that she can pass to her teammates. We'll talk about that in the job. For a final grade of an A, she is an excellent support built to play with multiple metas, and that's the thing. She's not going to shut down all of them, but she's absolutely a key chess piece to being very competitive, not only with Gilgamesh teams, but Sephiroth teams and the future Shreka teams. So that's very important for her as a unit, which, we get into the general thoughts here. The overall team utility can't be understated. That 6 range aura, much bigger than the auras that we're used to seeing, is 50% resistance to curse and frostbite and blind. She can buff teammates to have on-hit effects that they will seal barrier break and dispel follow-up attacks. So for King Mont's limit break, for Gilgamesh follow-up, for the future Shreka follow-up, that will dispel that part of their kit, which is a massively big part of damage in the game right now. She can also give 30% accuracy on a buff and on her heal. The heal that she does also gives a 50% two-hit magic barrier in the middle of the fight. Very important there. A chance to raise a teammate while also giving herself free raise, and her limit break dispels all debuffs and gives an additional 20% debuff weakening on that limit break. Finally, there is Esunaga on the cleric sub, which is also another great way to counter the curse mechanic, which not many units have. And so there's a ton of great utility there. Book also has some great rainbow potential, particularly with Katana and Staff Black Mage, but Sword Red Mage with the future vision card we're going to get and Greatsword are certainly very serviceable as well. So those are 4 very meta potential groupings that she slides right in very easily with. Now, again, I've personally found her buff and her rotation and spacing initially difficult on this Guild War map, and it's a height problem. We'll talk about that soon. So right now, today, she's not going to be as impressive as she will be 1 month from now, quite frankly. She does have the tools for both anti-physical and anti-magic. Certainly like to see that. She's great at taking damage from range at well, which, as I mentioned, she will normally stay behind teammates a little bit more than your average support. And she's got a honeycomb barrier on her passive, which will help reduce the damage because of that. Her vision card ability is an amazing skill as well. I don't go in depth here in the presentation, but that vision card gives a one-time large AoE heal that's also CT up and AoE res. If she can get an extra instant heal in the fight here, very, very nice for what she can do for turn order and whatnot. So overall, very happy with the kit, even though some stats aren't exactly where you want them to be. Now, should you pull? My answer is yes. Again, this is obviously subjective to whether you even have the Katana cards or the Staff Black Mage vision cards. If you have a good Sword Red Mage team, Summer Glaciella is a staple of the Sword Red Mage teams. And so right now, if you're asking yourself, should I get Resnick or should I get Summer Glaciella? I'll be honest, I don't have a good answer because Summer Glaciella is absolutely one of the S tier units in the game, but I don't know how long she's going to continue lasting as good as she is, but it's seemingly going to be still good. So this is a very difficult should you pull because I think you have an alternative option from the Summer banners. So this is really subjective to like what you already have built out in your account. But that being said, great rainbow support, as I mentioned, very well rounded with great on-hit abilities, which right now in the game, you can't dispel those on-hit abilities. So that's very valuable at the moment. Lots of healing potential up and down her kit on various different abilities. I would look forward to the Orochi Esper and Vision card, which I believe is coming either next week or a couple weeks from now, which elevates her a bunch. Amazing teammate support for Sephiroth, quite frankly, who most people in the game currently have. So even if you can get her and Sephiroth together, you're count is going to be in a very good shape right now. And her being a once a year limited unit is part of the factor where, yeah, you have to consider pulling a unit like this so you don't miss out. That's the nature of the limited units. Now, for the passive abilities, the top one here is an absolute must. It's the Honeycomb Barrier, 15 healing power, debuff weakening, and it's an ability to reduce magic damage taken by 20% for 2 hits. Now, I do prefer the agility passive as the second one, but I don't hate the other cast time down one. It's just not 100% necessary. It's got the extra fire and ice resistance, which is certainly nice right now, where we are in the current meta, particularly with Shreka not in the game yet. But I think this bottom two you can play with depending on the turn order. And the counter abilities, the top one here is awesome, just from the proc rate of 70% for slash and magic damage. It'll reduce that damage incoming by 30%. The other ones are okay. The second one, it is niche to missile units. And the third one, I think with all the reaction block in the game currently, these 20% effects, unless it's a reflex, really aren't as good as they used to be. So I would stay with the top one here. And for the main job buffs, this is the most important part of her kit. The first teammate buff here is a great AoE shape that she will be able to capture herself and multiple teammates. It doesn't repeat. It's a 50% physical barrier for 4 times. It's unit res, and these are the 2 on-hit effects of Barrier Seal and Dispel follow-ups. In addition to the accuracy, the second buff here is crucially important. This is her giant 6-range aura that does the Frostbite Curse blind res of 50% and some crit evasion here. This is also some self buffs of slash magic res and AoE res. This is an absolutely critical buff to get off. The one demerit is that it's a range height of 1. And so on this current map, because of how her AI works, the Guild War map, you start at a height of 2, and there's a height of 0 area right in front of you, which is, 2 heights down. So in the current Guild War map, a lot of times your teammates that are hanging out in that height 0 area will not be protected by this aura and will still get cursed and frostbitten. So it's not 100% perfect. In this map, it's not great, but this is still an exceptional strong ability overall. Now, the curative potential here, there's really 2 cures and 1 raise, if you will. The top one here is great for the accuracy and the attack buff. The second one here is really the largest contributor to healing, though, with the large diamond of the 210 modifier. It's the magic barrier for 2 hits as well. The last one here is a mid-fight ability where she will raise a teammate not to 100% HP. It's only 60% HP, but she'll also give herself a re-raise on that cast, so she can get a mid-fight re-raise, which is actually kind of nice because if you re-raise too early, oftentimes that's how it can get dispelled on those first couple hits. Excellent curative potential here. And the offensive potential, really only this one singular ability. It's a small cross shape, 5 squares away. It does have a cast time of 320. We'll talk about that soon. 220% mod, and this is nice from the fact that it's got a chance to inflict slow, but it's also 15% damage reduction to those enemies as well. Now, the limit break, this is that dispel all debuffs. Huge 310% cure modifier on a giant diamond. Excellent limit break overall. And then for the sub-jobs here, she's got another type of heal ability, and this one amplifies crit rate. Instead, it is a cast time on that, though, which is different than the one we just saw that's instant. And this large TP ability is actually kind of nice from the perspective that she'll only use this when her hit rate is 0 on pseudo-evade enemies, which is going to be quite often because, as we said, she's not very accurate. And it only works if they have courage or re-raise. And so the way this works is that she will take away 20 AP from them, but also dispel courage and re-raise, but only if the hit rate is 0 and if all your teammates are full at health. This is a little bit niche, but actually kind of valuable. I don't hate this, and this is a competitive sub-job, but I think the Cleric is better. Now, for Sword Sorcerer, I don't like anything on the sub-job. I would just pass on it, but the Cleric, the real big upside here is the Esunaga that, as we just mentioned on that Guild War map, should someone get cursed anyway by accident, she does have a way to still remove it alongside all these other status effects as well. The Curative Prayer one, also not awful. It is a very strong 210 mod with another kind of Dispel debuff. So to me, I prefer the Cleric sub-job overall. And just if we're looking at cast times here, the top one here is just innately speaking, her re-raise ability is the longest cast at 4 ticks. Everything else is 3 ticks if you do nothing else at all. If you have a cast time reduction 200 Truststone passive on her, it will drop that offensive ability to 2 ticks, so that can be recommended, and I think I do. If you do happen to have the passive ability on, though, on her job, that's also the ice and fire res, it drops everything by an entire tick. And if you do this, you do not need a Truststone passive because it will not make a difference for that offensive ability. So I think I do prefer having that extra cast time reduction, but we're not seeing as much jamming thrust type abilities in the game nowadays. So 3 ticks, still pretty slow. I'd still be kind of worried, but not the end of the world like it used to be 6 months to a year ago. Now, for the TMR review, this is an exceptional TMR. 5 agility is absolutely awesome to see, but this skill is a very cool cross-shape ranged buff that will grant protect and will give teammates a 25% heal back when they fall below a certain threshold. This is an amazing accessory, but the problem for Resnick in particular, this TMR, alongside many others, has a higher priority of use than her second buff, which is the aura, and that is very dangerous. It's very tough to get this into the wrinkle of things, but this is a very strong TMR, even if you pull her. Now, for the job-based vision cards, as we mentioned, Staff Black Mage and Katana are the best, but Sword Red Mage and Greatsword are certainly there as well. I think those are both extremely viable considering how strong those units are. And the unique equipment, her book, I think this is all you ever really need for her. This is 15% reduced physical damage the larger the AoE. It's got magic and healing power on it as well. And from a general optimization perspective, I would stick with probably the pod accessories just for some extra agility and unit or AoE res, but I could see instances where maybe you go with the Marshmallow accessory or the Survival Vest as well. For Espers, pretty straightforward. It's really all matchup specific, whether or not you ever want element resistance on your Esper, but other than that, just go for Dark Siren, Bahamut. Shinryu's nice for the accuracy if you're trying to give her a little bit, but you really don't have to. But I think the Orochi Esper incoming is very, very good for her. And the TMR is very subjective, as I've said a couple times. At the worst case scenario, just go for one that has high agility on it and call it a day. Now, some of my favorite teams, this is one of the things where Resnick is still kind of being built out. I actually don't mind her in mono fire teams, and this is an example on the top, but I do think you could sub in Soul for Volk as well, and that's still a very, very strong team. The second team here, though, is the big one that's being used in JP at the moment, that when Shreka comes out, this combo of 3 units will be a very formidable team of 3, but once the Orochi Esper also comes out with the Red Mage aspect on that vision card, Summer Glaciella and Gilgamesh are also a viable team iteration with her, as well as like a heavy Katana team, and straight up even just a team with Sephiroth and Gilgamesh. The thing is that she doesn't hard counter any one unit in particular. She kind of counters all 3 of the big meta units a little bit, so you can kind of splash her in to a lot of these teams and still get a lot of value, which is obviously really nice. Now, for the sample build, just eyeballing some of the stats, I chose the mono fire team here just as a generic example. Her magic's a little bit on the lower side at the 1400 because I have the Dark Tetrasulfid vision card here for the unit res, but her magic stat could get easily as high as the 1600 to even a little bit higher range depending on if you have magic scaling equips. But she does fall in that like mid 10,000s HP side of things. Agility is still very healthy here at 124. I'm very happy with that number. She does have 40 healing power in this build. The 20 debuff weakening. Effective HP is overall not bad considering it's not in the strongest starting spots. Overall, I think she comes in at a good enough spot from a general stat perspective. And then the Truststones. This is really dependent upon the weapon that you have equipped, but assuming you're using her book that she came out with, I would recommend these 6 on the right. Fire Attack 10, Accuracy 10, the Magic Res Pen, the Spirit Pen, the Magic Attack, and the Cast Time Reduction I think are all really good for her. The only one I might sub out is maybe the accuracy for a reaction block 20, but at this point, she's not going to be attacking that often anyway, so I have this set up because to me, if you're going to hit someone once, at least try to make it count. But she doesn't need a lot from a Truststone perspective. And that's my thoughts altogether. This is not some kind of S-tier, crazy, broken, game-changing character. She's going to be very popular in the top end and will be a critical piece of bridging this current meta to whatever comes next, because she is showing that there is counterplay to Sephiroth, Gilgamesh, and Shreka. But I've no doubt you're going to get value out of pulling her. Absolutely recommend maxing her. The vision card is a maybe. You don't really need it for her, although the ability is certainly nice. But there's so many other good things coming from a holo vision card perspective that at least get the unit, and she's going to last a fairly long time in my opinion. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll talk to y'all later.